Beaumont-sur-Oise, France, February 19, 1945. Just before 10 in the morning, over the ragged edge of the Reich, a Douglas A-26 Invader is running for home. Its port engine is coughing. Its wings are shot through with flak holes the size of dinner plates. At the controls sits Major Myron Durkee, 386th Bomb Group, 9th Air Force. He has just seen something that should not exist. A shape has slid across his canopy at a speed no piston engine can match, 540 miles per hour, an Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter, and it is coming for him. Durkee's Invader is doing 355 miles per hour flat out. On paper, the jet has him. On paper, the mission is already over. On paper, Durkee is a dead man. The Me-262 fires. Durkee's gunner fires back. The German jet falls away toward the ground, streaming smoke. Probable kill. Not confirmed. Just a probable, filed in a mission report and forgotten by the men who wrote it. But Durkee is not the story. The story is what almost happened, but did not. Because by February 1945, Germany had built the fastest interceptor in the sky, and they still could not stop the invader. The reason is not what you think. Pause on that, because if you have heard the popular version, it goes like this. Douglas built the fastest twin-engine attack bomber America ever put over Europe. 355 miles per hour, a laminar flow wing, 6,000 pounds of bombs, and Luftwaffe fighters could not catch it. That is the story. It is almost entirely untrue. The Bf 109 G6 could catch it. Top speed 386 miles per hour. The FW-198-8 could catch it. Top speed 408 miles per hour, with 53 miles per hour to spare. The Me-262 could outfly it by nearly 200 miles per hour. On paper, the Invader should have died in droves over Germany. It did not. The 9th Air Force flew 11,567 combat missions in A-26s over Europe. They dropped 18,054 tons of bombs. They lost 67 aircraft. Of the 416th Bomb Group, the first unit in the world to fully convert to the Invader, 33 A-26s were lost in combat, 14 to flak, 19 to battle damage, 0 to enemy fighters. Read that again. 0. This is not a story about an aircraft that could not be caught. This is a story about American engineering arriving at the exact moment when German fighter doctrine had run out of pilots to catch it. To understand why, we need to go back not to the Invader's first combat mission, but to a room in Berlin 4 years earlier. In the autumn of 1940, the Luftwaffe fighter arm believed something reasonable. It believed that any bomber sent against Germany at medium altitude without escort could be systematically destroyed. This was not arrogance. It was arithmetic. A Bf 109 climbing at 1,700 feet per minute could reach an intruder's altitude in 8 minutes. A pair of them could pincer a bomber formation in 12. Someone would find the blind spot. Someone always did. Their assessment was not insane. It was based on available data. In October 1943, the 8th Air Force sent 291 B-17s to Schweinfurt. 60 were shot down. Another 122 were damaged so badly they were written off. 650 American airmen were killed or captured in a single afternoon. The Luftwaffe had done exactly what its doctrine promised. The Americans had a name for that week: Black Week. 152 heavy bombers destroyed, 1,500 trained aircrew gone. Daylight bombing over Germany was suspended for 4 months. If you were a German fighter commander in the winter of 1943, the equation was simple. Send up the interceptors, kill the bombers. The math held. The math would not hold for long, because the Americans did 2 things at once. They kept building B-17s, and they built P-51s. In February 1944, a single-engine fighter with a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine and drop tanks appeared over Berlin. The Luftwaffe was ordered to ignore the escorts and focus on the bombers. It could not. From January to May of 1944, the Luftwaffe lost roughly 2,262 fighter pilots killed, close to the entire strength it had begun the year with. The bombers kept coming. The trainees kept dying. By June 1944, the Luftwaffe fighter arm was a hollow shell, not the aircraft. Germany was still building fighters, more than at any point in the war. What it could not build was pilots. The men who had learned their trade over Spain and Poland and France were dead or captured. Their replacements were teenagers with 50 hours in the air, being sent up to intercept veterans with 500. This is the room the A-26 was about to walk into. Not the Luftwaffe of 1943, ruthless and technically superior. The Luftwaffe of late 1944, running on fumes and adolescents. Now imagine you send the fastest twin-engine attack bomber America has ever built into that room, and ask what the fighters were going to do about it. To understand the aircraft that walked into that room, we need to go back to a letter written on November 5th, 1940. It came from Major Frank Carroll, chief of the Air Corps' Experimental Engineering Section at Wright Field, Ohio. Carroll listed what the Army wanted improved in the A-20 Havoc: faster, longer range, more bombs, more guns, and crucially room for a 75mm cannon in the nose. The letter went to Douglas Aircraft in El Segundo, California. It landed on the desk of a man named Ed Heinemann. Heinemann was 32 years old. He had joined Douglas as a draftsman in 1926. He had never finished an engineering degree. What he had was an obsession with 3 words: keep it simple, keep it fast, keep it lethal. He had already designed the SBD Dauntless, the dive bomber that would sink 4 Japanese carriers at Midway. He had designed the A-20 Havoc. Now he was going to build its replacement. His team was small: Robert Donovan on structures, Ted Smith on production engineering, and, for the wing, an aerodynamicist named A.M.O. Smith, who chose the newest airfoil the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics had ever released, a laminar flow wing, the same category of aerodynamic breakthrough that would soon give the P-51 its extraordinary reach. By April 1941, Heinemann had a full-scale wooden mock-up on the factory floor. In June, he had a contract. In July 1942, 3 prototypes were ordered. On July 10, 1942, at Mines Field in California, test pilot Benny Howard climbed into the first prototype, ran up the 2 Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp radials at 2,000 horsepower each, and lifted the aircraft into a Los Angeles sky. The prototype flew well, cleanly, fast. It also flew hot. The engine cowlings blocked cooling airflow. Douglas redesigned them. The nose landing gear collapsed repeatedly during testing. Douglas strengthened it. The night fighter variant was cancelled after the Air Corps chose the Northrop P-61 Black Widow instead. The 75mm cannon prototype would never see operational combat. Pause on that, because this is the part of the story where American industrial design does something Germany could not do. It fails. It fails openly. It fails on the record, and it fixes what it broke without asking permission. By early 1943, Heinemann's team had settled the airframe. Wingspan 70 feet, length 50 feet 9 inches, twin double Wasp radials, a laminar flow wing with double slotted flaps, 6,000 pounds of bombs, 6.50 caliber machine guns in a solid nose for strafing runs, or a glass bombardier's nose with a Norden bomb sight for medium altitude precision. The noses were interchangeable in a few hours. The first production of 26B rolled out of the Long Beach factory on September 10, 1943. The problem was that Douglas could not build them fast enough. General Hap Arnold, Chief of the Army Air Forces, wrote the phrase every American designer dreaded: "One thing is certain, I want the A-26 in use in this war." It took 28 months from first flight to first combat mission, delayed by production changes, delayed by remote turret problems that never fully worked, delayed by an Air Force unsure what to do with an aircraft too fast for its light bomber doctrine and too small for its heavy bomber doctrine. By the time the first invaders reached England in September 1944, the war they had been designed for was ending. The Luftwaffe they had been built to fight was gone, and quietly, that turned out to be the plan. If you're learning something from this story, tap the like button. Every like on this video keeps these men visible. Ed Heinemann, Benny Howard, the crews you're about to meet, the dead who cannot speak for themselves. That is what the like button does on this channel. It keeps them in front of people who still care. Here is the question. No popular history of the A-26 answers. Why could Germany not build one? The Germans were not stupid. They had aerodynamicists as good as any in the world. They had radial engines. They understood laminar flow. They had built the Ju-88, a bomber more versatile than the A-26 on paper. Why did they never field an equivalent? The answer is not in the design. The answer is in the drawer under the design. American engineers in 1942 could pick up a telephone and order any material they wanted in any quantity they could justify. Aluminum, copper, nickel, chromium, rubber, high-octane aviation fuel. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 swallowed 150-octane fuel like a man drinking from a garden hose. There was effectively no material constraint on the design. Heinemann drew what he wanted. The factories built what he drew. German engineers in 1944 could not do this. The Jumo 004B, the turbine engine that pushed the ME 262 to 540 miles per hour, had turbine blades made of mild steel, with a thin coating of aluminum, because Germany had run out of nickel and chromium. Those blades lasted between 10 and 25 flight hours before they had to be replaced. Every operational mission burned through half a lifespan of engine. The war had produced a fighter that could catch the A-26, but not enough functioning engines to keep the fighter in the air. This is not a moral judgment. It is an observation about how systems fail. American engineering succeeded because it could afford to. German engineering failed because it could not. Heinemann's philosophy assumed abundance. It assumed the Long Beach factory could work 3 shifts. It assumed Tulsa, Oklahoma could build 1,100 glass-nosed variants in parallel. It assumed Pratt and Whitney could deliver tens of thousands of engines. All of those assumptions were correct. All of them would have been fantasies in Germany. By war's end, Douglas had delivered somewhere between 2,451 and 2,502 Invaders. Sources vary. What does not vary is the ratio. Roughly 2,500 A-26s against a few hundred operational Me-262s, 2,500 simple, brutal, honest attack bombers built in California and Oklahoma, a few hundred advanced, delicate, resource-starved jets built in Bavaria. Both were engineering marvels. Only one of them could be replaced when it was lost. Now the aircraft meets the war. November 17th, 1944. RAF, Wethersfield, England. The 416th Bomb Group is about to fly its 159th combat mission. It is also about to fly the first full Group A-26 mission in the world. 28 aircraft are on the field. Their target is a German supply depot at Haguenau in eastern France. The 416th had spent the previous year flying A-20 Havocs. They had lost 47 aircraft, 26 to flak, 21 to battle damage. Their crews had watched the losses mount and asked quietly what the replacement was going to be. The A-26, faster than the Havoc by nearly 100 miles per hour, longer range, twice the bomb load. The mission to Haguenau flew without loss. The 9th Air Force decided within weeks to convert its 3 A-20 groups first, ahead of the Marauder units. The 409th Bomb Group followed the 416th into combat. The 410th converted after Christmas. In the Pacific, the 3rd Bomb Group's Grim Reapers had already flown A-26s into combat 5 months earlier, against Japanese-held islands near Manokwari, New Guinea. Not every crew loved the aircraft. General George Kenney, commanding the 5th Air Force in the Pacific, told Washington plainly, "We do not want the A-26 under any circumstances as a replacement for anything." His crews complained they could not see the ground from the low cockpit. Douglas fixed that on later production aircraft with a clamshell canopy. Over Europe, the objection did not hold. The Luftwaffe was gone. The flak was not. German 88mm guns had grown up during the strategic bombing campaign. Their crews had been at it for 3 years. Their radar was as good as anything the Allies had, and unlike German fighter pilots, German flak gunners did not need years of training. A boy of 16 could load a shell. A retired railway worker could aim the piece. For the 416th Bomb Group, the numbers came out this way: 33 A-26 combat losses, 14 to flak, 19 to battle damage, 0 to fighters. Across the entire 9th Air Force, at 26 operations, 67 aircraft were lost. 7 enemy aircraft were shot down. Whatever a German fighter pilot did to an invader over Europe, he did it in the last few weeks of the war, in the dying days of an Air Force that was already beaten. Pause on that, because when the popular story says German fighter pilots could not stop the A-26, this is the truth underneath the claim. They could not stop it because most of them were already dead, and the ones who were left could not find enough fuel or spare parts to reach altitude. The Germans had jet fighters. The Americans had aluminum. The Germans had turbine engines that lasted 10 hours. The Americans had radial engines that lasted 1,000. The Germans had pilots who could outturn any Allied aircraft in the sky. The Americans had a training pipeline that could replace a squadron in a week. The Germans had the last, most brilliant fighter design of the piston era. The Americans had 11,567 combat missions on a single airframe, and the tools to build the next airframe waiting on the factory floor. Major Myron Durkee survived the war. His probable Me-262 from February 1945 was never upgraded to a confirmed kill. It sits in the mission logs of the 386th Bomb Group as a small, honest fragment. Probable, not confirmed. Second Lieutenant Philip Russell and Staff Sergeant Wallace Mifflin never reached combat. They were killed on July 11th, 1944, in a training crash of an early A-26B at a stateside airfield. Russell was the pilot. Mifflin was the gunner. Their names sit on a summary sheet in an archive nobody visits. They were the Invader's first fatalities. They died before it ever saw combat. Captain John Walmsley, Jr., born Baltimore, Maryland, on January 7, 1920, 8th Bombardment Squadron, 3rd Bomb Wing, 5th Air Force, Korea. On September 14, 1951, over Yangdok, North Korea, Walmsley disabled a communist supply train with his B-26 Invader. It was the same airframe. The Air Force had renamed it after 1948. Walmsley then did something he did not have to do. He turned around, dropped to searchlight altitude, and illuminated the train so his wingmen could destroy it, under fire the entire time. He was shot down and killed on his second pass. Aged 31. He is the only United States Air Force bomber pilot to receive the Medal of Honor in Korea. He flew the airframe Ed Heinemann had drawn a decade earlier. Let me be honest, because the historian voice demands it. The A-26 did not win the war in Europe. The P-51 did. The Merlin-powered escort fighters that gutted the Luftwaffe by June 1944 are the reason the Invader flew into a broken sky in November. The A-26 was the beneficiary of a victory it did not have to earn. But that is not the interesting question. The interesting question is whether an engineering culture that produced the Invader could also produce the Mustang. And it did, and it produced the Dauntless, and the Sky Raider, and the Skyhawk, and the Superfortress, because the same drawer full of aluminum and nickel and 150-octane fuel was open to every American designer for 4 straight years. The Invader stayed in frontline combat for 25 years, from Manokwari in 1944 to Nakhon Phanom in 1969. It flew in Korea, it flew in French Indochina and Algeria, it flew for the Central Intelligence Agency at the Bay of Pigs, and over the Ho Chi Minh Trail with the Nimrods of the 609th Special Operations Squadron. Ed Heinemann kept designing. He drew the A-1 Sky Raider. He drew the A-4 Skyhawk. He was still working when he died in 1991, aged 83. Subscribe if you want the next chapter. There are more of these. The story of the A-20 Havoc, the aircraft the Invader replaced, and why its crews called it the Widowmaker. The story of the Martin B-26 Marauder, the aircraft the 9th Air Force lost fastest of all, and why its crews refused to give it up, and the story of Ed Heinemann's A-1 Sky Raider, the propeller-driven attack aircraft still flying combat missions in Vietnam 20 years after it should have been retired, because by February 1945, Germany had built the fastest interceptor in the sky, and it still could not stop Major Myron Durkee's A-26 Invader from flying home, not because the aircraft was uncatchable, because the German who was supposed to catch it was already dead.